Have you ever wanted to sell a single video for $100,000? Well, in this video, I want to talk about my challenge to myself about 7 years ago, and what I went through when I set this challenge. And I'm hoping that some of you watching this will take the lessons and take some of my experience and maybe start embedding that into your business. Now, the first thing I want to say to you is that we've all got to have integrity. This isn't about sales. This isn't about trickery. This isn't about wordplay or, sound bites. This is a lot to do with belief and value and evidence that this is needed and that this is something that you'll see in the story to start with. So, when I set myself this challenge around 7 years ago, so 7, 8 years ago, the first thing I needed was evidence, right? And I think a lot of us need this, that we can charge clients more, but it was more around why was other people being able to sell these high-end commercials and I couldn't do it? Why were they be able to sell something massive and I couldn't do it, right? And so it led me to the biggest question is, well, what are they buying? Like, what exactly are they buying these videos for, and why are they spending so much money? And so that led me down a rabbit hole, which I'll get to in a second. But the first thing that I want to say is that I had a strong advantage. That strong advantage was I worked for Yellow Pages. And, we were seeing 4 or 5 clients a day as a Yellow Pages rep. And we were closing, arguably some days 250,000. We were doing full page ads for 50,000. And back then, before I started, this is way before I started my video business. Back then, it was the go-to place where to advertise, where to market yourself, where to brand, where to get leads. People were seeking out products and services from Yellow Pages. And so I had somewhat of a belief because I remember like local pest guys, local lawyers, like we're talking like 1 or 2 man crews spending 50 grand on a full page ad. And I'm like, a lot of the time, and for those of you that were ever a rep that may see this, we were just like order takers. We were just going there and taking the order because there was no really a greater place to market themselves. So going into my business, I had a belief. I knew that and I didn't just work in Australia, I worked in the United Kingdom. This is the same energy, right? It was a belief that got inside me that I could see small businesses were spending that. So going into my video business was somewhat exciting because I felt like I could offer something like that. And obviously I developed myself as a storyteller and I had my own style and I had my own way of doing things. And my stuff was very much aimed at the entrepreneur and brands that was really seeking, to demonstrate trust and differentiate themselves through this thing that I called humanizing, right? It was my sort of it was my signature style of where I would go at my clients. I would offer up a 3 to 5 minute brand story that would humanize. So when I set the challenge, I was very much sort of into my own style, my own development, and I ended up getting a lead for a government body. And this was the trigger. So like I set obviously the challenge, but this is what triggered it. Is that I remember going into the meeting and we got through the whole thing, and back then I was only selling like between 5 and 10,000. 10,000 was my main biggest that was my biggest sale, so to speak. And I remember just playing with this idea of increasing prices. I'd seen a lot. I'd knew a lot of other really great cinematographers. I was watching them. I was being inspired by them. I was looking into how much did people pay for stuff, and I was sort of really flirting with the idea of like increasing. So I ended up. The lady, she asked me. She said, like, the client at the time, which was a government safety video. She said, "How much?" And I said, 20,000. And before I even got into why or justification and getting into the features and start selling and everything, she said, "Yep, that's fine. When can we start?" And I said, "Tomorrow." And we did. We finished that project within a week and I was paid within a week. So we did 1 day's worth of shooting. We did planning the next day. And then we did the shoot, and then it was in the edit, and it was finished. And that was it. Just sent a absolute wildfire like underneath my stomach. That like if I did that every week, that would be some serious money. And I was doing everything. I owned my own gear. I did everything myself. I had some help, like some camera assistant people and people that would help with editing, but I didn't have a lot of costs at all. And I was like, we got that finished, closed and finished within a week. And that really, really inspired me. And so I continued in my business, and then I ended up starting to understand. And this is the thing that really led me to the ability to take this challenge on and gave me hope that it could be possible, was me discovering why do people buy? What is the psychology behind why people invest in stuff and why people don't invest in stuff? And through countless hours of research and countless hours of looking at videos and asking and insights and just fucking working at it and just trying to understand what is valuable to businesses, from reflecting back on Yellow Pages to reflecting back on the current state that I was in, and then, all the research that I was doing, I could boil it down to like what I call now the 4 pillars of value. The 4 pillars of value is something that you've got to understand when you're pitching to someone, because one, you should have the integrity to not sell them if you don't have one of these 4 pillars of value, because I think this is really ultimately like um the biggest exchange. We're not selling videos, we're selling an outcome. And that's something that was my first lesson. And then I'm like, well, what's the fucking outcome? What kind of outcome do they want? I'm thinking to myself, they just want a video. And that was back in the day when, I had that sort of more of a relaxed energy in it. And then I was well before I even started the challenge. I was just selling videos. And so I worked out they needed an outcome, and I brought it down to these 4 things. Number one is that clients want speed. They want speed or to save time. Number two, they want to reduce their risk. And that can be looked at as an example, maybe that they're looking like everyone else online, so they need to differentiate themselves. Number three is they want more status. They want to raise their perceived value so that they can charge more, and they want to be more in high demand. And this also helps with lead gen as well. Status is a good thing for people to be like. When people were on video, it was back then when TV was a big deal. It was hard to get on TV. So like when you started creating videos online, it kind of had that same psychological effect. It's not so strong now in today's world, but status would be a big deal, and it would help increase their demand, increase their trustability, increase their likability. And the fourth pillar, which I think a lot of you watching me should really zone into, is more money, is conversion, is making more sales. And so I had this client, and I finished that project, that the 20K project, and I went off and I learned this stuff. And then I ended up getting these 4 pillars of value, and I started to have different conversations. I started to ask different questions to clients. And I ended up getting this client. He was a developer, builder, and he had just built 4 townhouses. These townhouses were in one of the most pristine areas in Melbourne, and each one of them was going for $2.8 million. And he was telling me that he had some ideas around doing some talking heads, and he wants to sort of talk about the project, and he wants to do a whiteboard in front of them and show them like how the investment's going to work, and et cetera, et cetera. And I said to you, I actually asked him, I said, do you have anybody interested in this? And he said yes. And so what dawned on me, it was like at the time I was like doing these things called brand stories, these things that would sort of these 3 minute, 4, 5. I was really developing a style. It was my style. I loved it. I loved making them. I was charging a lot of money for them back then. That was when I was doing them, hitting them sort of after the 20K, I was starting hitting 20K. So I was getting used to selling at a much more higher end. And at the time, I just upgraded my camera, and I said, look, why don't we create a brand story around the properties, right? And we come up, and I came up with this idea alongside of him, was why don't we tell the passing of time, like a memoir, like this is where your children are going to be, where the dog is going to be, where you're going to get married, where your grandchildren are going to be, and it's going to be the passing of time. Like it was a 3 minute piece that would create an energy around this sale, around this thing for people that were already in consideration that wanted to somewhat have a feeling around this particular project. And he said, "How much is it going to cost?" And I said, 50,000. And because I'd convinced him that I can see it selling quicker, and because he had people lined up that were kind of somewhat interested, he agreed. He said, "Okay, let's do it." And we created this film, and it was a success. Like it was a good film. Like I mean, like the creativity was great. So I gave it to him, and he sent it to his investors overseas. And within 2 days, all properties were sold, completely done. And one of the driving factors around that was they didn't want the video to go online because they knew it would. Their fear was that it would increase the demand for the opportunity. Because obviously I'm not saying that I was the one that completely made this out. He did a lot of other work, like around. He had websites and he had a PDF document, and he sent it to them as a package. And but he said he has, this is the plan of like how they're gonna market, et cetera, et cetera. So they jumped in on the deal. Okay. And that was the start. I was like, okay, now this value, 4 pillars of value, has become very evident to me because you need evidence that this stuff works, right? You can't just wake up one day and just be like, oh, I'm just going to start selling 50K and I'm just going to start selling 100K videos to these clients. You need some form of evidence, right? That this is a real thing. And my evidence came into me very gradually, like that my work was good, and they could see the way I was thinking because maybe I had a bit more of a Yellow Pages background. I was thinking in terms of strategy plus creativity. I wasn't just coming at them with like, let's just do this romantic piece for the sake of doing it, but I was coming at them like, this is when they feel this feeling, this is at the point which is really crucial, they can get this. So I went on and I sold many 50K projects after that. It gave me a lot of confidence, but I still had this challenge of wanting to do 100K. And so I ended up meeting this educator. This educator he didn't have the best sort of, he was doing a heavy video, like very, very sort of daily type of videos. And it wasn't really hitting the mark very well. It wasn't hitting the sweet spot. And I ended up um, doing a video for him, like a brand story. And it was 50K. And I ended up, you know, he was running a lot of events. He was an educator. And he ended up packing out this room. And so I demonstrated a lot of value for him because he wanted high status and he wanted money and he wanted speed of sale, but he wanted to differentiate. And so that's exactly what we gave him, right? I went into it with like, let me humanize you. Let me tell the backstory. Let people feel why you're doing what you're doing. Let people feel what you're fighting for. Let people feel what the contribution is and why this matters to you so much. And we did it. It was successful. It packed out the room. Now, when I went into that room, he invited me in. He said, come and watch. Bring your camera." Like I knew this guy was gonna, because he'd had ticket sales one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. I knew that he was going to continue working with me, right? I just knew because of the result I got him. Sure, he paid me 50 grand, and I honestly think I could have charged more, but he was very happy with me, and we bonded through this project as well. We became very we had a certain level of intimacy between each other, because when you're telling these type of stories where you're working with clients on their why and you're figuring out what they're fighting for, you have to spend the time to get to know them, right? And that's part of what like creatively fulfills me, is like knowing the real story. Yes, I'm productizing these brand stories, but every story is different because everybody has different experience, and that's what makes it so enjoyable to make these type of videos. They're just much more powerful because nobody's story is exactly the same. So fast forward, I went to the event. So I'm inside the event and I can see he's 3 days in and I'm filming away, and I can see that he's somewhat a little bit on the third day, a little bit exhausted. Now, this day is really important for him because he's pitching them an upsell to 45,000. He's not looking for a lot of people. Like he's not looking for the thousand in the room, but he's looking for like, sales. And he's on stage and I'm watching him and I'm pitching. I'm like, is he going to close? He looks knackered. He's been giving him, like, he bled his soul over, like, there's a lot of people in the room, like, there's a lot of pressure on you when you're speaking as a speaker. If you've ever spoken in front of people, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you've got to really show up. And so he was pitching, and I could see he was exhausted. And I could see that the crowd was also exhausted. And it was evident because I was filming them, like I was filming, I was finding it hard to find people, like when we're looking for reaction shots and we're looking for smiling and engagement, I could see people on the phones. They were tired, they'd had enough, they got what they come for. They were kind of tuned out. And then I seen it. I was like, if we put a film there before he pitches, it's going to refresh the whole audience up. It's going to give him a break, save him some time, so he can recalibrate himself. It's going to give the viewer and the event itself something more enjoyable to watch, and it's going to be engaging. So I went straight to him and I said, "Look, I've got an opportunity, and I think this is going to help you because the conversion was very bad." And I said to him, I said, "Look, why don't we create a brand story or a brand documentary a little bit longer than your first one? And we don't put it online. We just keep it in the event so that when they see it, it's fresh. They've never seen this content before." And I said, "But the difference with this is we're going to have a lot of psychology pulls in there. We're going to have a lot of human elements to it. We're going to have some, you know, data. We're going to have music, pacing, sound, color. It's going to feel like a movie." And he said, and he just looked at me, I know that from me to him, I know he was in. I'd shown up, I'd humanized him. His status was very high at this point. He had a lot of people in the room. The reason he's getting him into the room, he was not making a lot of money on the front end sales. It was always on the back end sales. He was making most of the majority of the money. And so he's looking at me like, "You've already proven yourself to me. Like, and we've got this intimate bond. So he trusts me." And he said, "How much?" I said, 100 grand. Now, at the time, I was in Brisbane and the meeting was in the Gold Coast. By time I got back to Brisbane, which was 1 hour, he paid me the full 100,000. Now, that challenge was obviously, a big challenge for me, and I did it. But after that happened, just to give you the closing of the story, we ended up doing the film. It was a longer form type of film. It never went online. It was used in that event online. It did exactly what I told him to do, and his sales went through the roof because it gave him a refresh. It reconfigured the event to boost the energy back up, and the strategy just worked. It just really worked because I reverse engineered from the outcome. And I'm always thinking in terms of outcome. I'm always thinking to myself when I'm working with clients, like, take a client's result, build the story for what I want them to feel, and then bring them back to, okay, that would make them want to do that. It was a success. It was something I was very proud of. He made millions. And not only for one time, he used it over and over and over again. So like it comes back to this, like, the bait hook of this sort of, even this video of like, I made $100,000 for one video. It's not about the video. And this is where, like, when you're thinking about making your offer and you're thinking about designing your pitch to clients, I would say to you to start looking at these 4 pillars of value, which is make the client more money, save them time or speed time up, reduce their risk, or raise their status. Like, these are very powerful, powerful way, because your conversation is going to completely change. Your whole conversation, the way you talk to a client, is going to completely and utterly transform. And that's what makes it magic. And so I wanted to share the story because I feel like, I wish somebody had told me this earlier in my career, that I wasn't selling video. I was selling outcomes. I was selling impact. And as cheesy and as fucking weird as cliche as that sounds, I speak to 500 videographers every day. We've got people in the program, and and we're getting incredible results now. Like last week we had someone, dropping the wins channel, 35,000, other one, 35,000, 312. And I look at the wins and I think to myself, they're not getting wins because they've just got this trickery or this sliminess about them or this salesmanship about them. It's because they're going into that conversation with them 4 pillars. by asking the right questions and having the intention, the right intention to go in and make the actual outcome happen. Like, let's say that you're not that great with your camera. You're still in the early stages of learning how to put together, stories. Then lean into strategy. If you're such a good storyteller, but you just find like every time you give a video over, it just sits there and does nothing, then you need to lean into strategy. Lean into how can you place that to get the outcome and reverse engineer from that. It's not about, and I think this is why all the agencies get most of the majority of the money, because a lot of videographers don't think like this, right? And because I worked for Yellow Pages, I had some insight to like how businesses were thinking and seeing very small businesses spending 50,000 a year, like me literally taking an order and just going, "Yeah, I'll take it." So the lesson is there. It's like try to have more conversations around them four big outcomes, and I can almost assure you that the conversation, I'm not saying, I'm not going to promise you're going to get $100,000 video, but what I can almost assure you is that conversation will start to take on a very serious energy from the client. They will start to respect you. They will start to listen in more. You will find that they will start asking questions and that they will be much more willing to have a higher level conversation. And what does that lead to? That leads to you being able to sell more and be able to sell at a higher price point. And so I hope this video helped. Shooting these videos very raw. You can see, just shooting them on my phone. If you haven't liked or subscribed, make sure you do. And if you found this valuable, drop me a comment or got any questions. I'm happy to answer. I just updated the website, clout.tv. So have a look at that. For those of you that are interested in working a little bit more closely with me and my team to grow your business. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.